The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Arcane Wonders and Tasty Minstrel Games. Check out all their awesome titles at arcanewonders.com and playtmg.com.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's The Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Tasty Minstrel Games' Yokohama. Then we discuss importing games. And now, The Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
Boy, okay. Moving along. This is episode 144, Call Me Meiji.
Yeah.
Thanks to Matthew S. Can you sing it for us, Alex?
I could.
Wait, you don't want to sing a song?
I prefer my own compositions.
I'm laying down the beat for you there.
Is that a beat?
No, I'm laying down the melody. There you go.
Are you? All right. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy. So here's my... Wait, actually, Matthew S. wrote, who did this title on our Board Game Geek Guild
yes.
number 2008,
yes.
actually had proper lyrics for all of this, which I have to go and find. Sean, why don't you tell our listeners, while I'm going and finding this, how to go about naming episodes.
Doing stuff? Yeah. So go over and join our Board Game Geek Guild. We've got a fantastic community over there. It's BoardGameGeek.com, guild number 2008. And every week we put up a Dukes on Deck where we talk about what we're going to be discussing in the episode. And so you can add contributions there, which you'll hear from a lot of our listeners a little bit later, but also these episode title suggestions. And congrats to Matthew S. for Call Me Meiji. And we'll give you the runners up at the end of the episode. But before we do that, Alex, are you all queued up?
I am.
All right. So how'd the lyrics go for Matthew S.'s Call Me Meiji?
This is, well done, Matthew S. Here's the full lyric. Hey, there's Ibatsu. Now we are trading in Yokohama. So call me Meiji.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah. Wow as in like, I can't sing.
My wow was for Matthew S., not for you, Alex.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's his second episode title. Congrats to Matthew S.
Now that you're back, you're the one that tracks the information. So we'll have that real-time...
Oh, yeah. Real-time stats.
Yeah. Excellent.
All sorts of stats, but just on naming episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this podcast is not about pop songs from 5 or 6 years ago.
No.
It's actually about board games, Alex.
Occasionally.
Board games.
Well, it's about board games and occasionally role-playing games.
And occasionally role-playing games. By the way, I've got Rocky Mountain Gaming Vacation coming up soon.
Yeah.
In fact, I was kind of chatting with Tony from Rolling Dice Taking Names and Mark from Board Game Corner, and we're kind of planning on, doing something, some kind of media stuff. But there's some role-playing opportunities up there. So I think I'm going to take advantage of that because I am hankering, Alex, for a role-playing game.
I did last year. I played a Star Wars role-playing game of some flavor.
It was Destiny, right? It was the Fantasy Flight one?
Destiny?
Well, Force and Destiny. Was it Fantasy Flight?
I don't remember. It was a role-playing game involving Star Wars.
Excellent. I don't know. Why am I asking you for details, Alex?
You shouldn't.
It's a fool's errand.
Go back and listen to the show from a year ago. And maybe I talked about it in enough detail for you to tell.
All right. So real quick, before we talk about those board games, not role-playing games today, but at least the board games, just want to mention that we do have a lot of awesome supporters over on Patreon. And if you want to help support the podcast, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you go to patreon.com/Dukes of Dice, you can decide what level you'd like to help support the show. And yeah, we appreciate all of our awesome Patreon patrons. And in fact, by the time this episode drops, we will be airing our episode or our special interview episode that you did with Rob Davio. I'm not familiar with Rob Davio. What has he done?
He's done some stuff.
Okay.
And some things.
Oh, okay.
Mainly legacy stuff and things of late.
Oh.
So Pandemic Legacy, the number one BGG rated game. Yeah, that episode should have already been in your podcast feed a few days before this one actually comes out. So hopefully you've enjoyed it.
That's Rob Davio.
Yes. Not his evil cousin, Bob Davio.
But wouldn't both their names be Robert?
I mean, yes, you would think so.
Okay.
Anyway.
No,
it's actually Robert and Bobbert.
Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough.
The Davio brothers.
You got it, Alex.
Excellent.
Hey, let's talk about some board games.
Yeah. What have you been playing, Sean?
I got to play Race for the Galaxy. Wait for it. The app. Ooh, so this just came out a couple weeks ago, and I have probably played this against the AI a good 100 times in the last week. I've been playing this so much. I love Race for the Galaxy. I had a great time playing it on Board Game Arena, where I usually get my butt kicked. I think I'm probably like 5 and 50 on Board Game Arena. And what's really nice is the AI is pretty difficult in this particular app. And there's an easy, there's a medium, there's a hard. And I do pretty well against easy and medium. I've been playing exclusively in hard, and I'm still probably winning, I'd say 30% of the time. So it's a good, solid AI, and it's really kicking my butt. I could try different strategies. There's a bunch of the expansions that are available. I haven't purchased those yet, but I'm going to do that pretty soon. I'm having an absolute blast with this. We've talked about this before. We talked about Roll for the Galaxy, but basically it's a hand management game, tableau building, resource management a little bit, and it's just such a fantastic game. It's so good, and the opportunity to play it on my iPad is just awesome. So I'm really enjoying that. Only been playing 2-player though, which I tend to prefer, but if I can play like 3 or 4 players on the tablet against all AI players, that sounds pretty interesting. Remind me, have you played Race for the Galaxy? I mean, I know you enjoy Roll quite a bit.
I played both.
Okay.
I have played both. I've played Race a couple times now, actually.
Does an app version interest you at all?
Maybe.
A little bit faster. I mean, did you like Race?
It was okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I enjoyed Roll a little more.
Well, yeah, I figured you would, and I think I enjoy Roll more as well. But I don't know now. Now that I'm able to play it, I don't know. I don't want to think about it. Sophie's choice here, Alex. Sophie's choice.
But absolutely not that.
And no Nazis are involved.
Yeah, or any. Yeah, it's no.
I don't have to get rid of one of these games.
That was not well used, sir.
Well. Anyway, hey, so that's Race for the Galaxy, the new app. Definitely go check it out if you're a Race for the Galaxy fan.
So, Sean, yesterday at Board Game Night, the Dukes of Dice Board Game Night at Empire Board Game Library, our local hangout here in Albuquerque, I had a happy reunion of sorts. No, it wasn't with any of the gamers from our regular Wednesday game group, because I've been back for several weeks now.
And you hate all of them anyway.
That's not...
Because you're kind of a jerk.
Wait, whoa.
Well, hey.
I'm only a jerk to Steve O'Rourke.
I'm just revealing the things that you say off air.
Steve, the beef isn't over. Anyway, yeah, there's things I say off air.
I really want a roast beef sandwich from Arby's now.
All right.
Sounds really good. Go on.
Okay, because I just said the word beef.
Yeah.
All right.
I do. Some Arby's sauce?
Maybe you should have had some dinner.
Maybe.
Before we recorded. No, the reunion was with a game called Honshu, which I can't remember if I played this at BGG Con.
BGG Con.
Okay. I was going to say, or Dice Tower Con.
Well, last night you thought it was a Dice Tower Con that we played
That's
previously.
correct. I forgot which con it was. It was at BGG Con, and this has been brought over here by Renegade Games, and it's awesome.
In fact, it was revealed at BGG Con that Renegade had acquired the rights to bring it over here.
So yeah, that news came out at BGG Con, and that was one of the best games I played at BGG Con.
Well, I think it was your game of the con.
It might have been. I don't remember.
And I think it might have been my game of the con.
Might have been.
Okay.
I don't remember this. It's very possible it was. I played some good games there.
Yeah.
But I remember really enjoying this one. Got a chance to play this one at 3-player. Basically, all of the retail copies just arrived at Empire on Wednesday. So a number of people picked this one up in the game group, and it got to the table quite a few times as far as I could tell. And I think folks seem to be enjoying this. For folks who don't know, this is a card map build, your sort of city building game where you're playing out these cards that are divided into 6 different squares. And you're using the cards. The cards themselves have numbers on them, which are used to bid in the round. You can up that bid by throwing on resources. And then the turn order resets, and then you draft the cards you just played. So, and that card you played has to be added to your map. You're looking to get points from lakes, from forests, from delivering goods to different factories, and from the largest city, chunks of city that are contiguous.
Yeah, it has different means of scoring, kind of like you'd see in Quadropolis or Between Two Cities. And it's kind of a trick-taking game in the same way that Pai-Mao Flaumen, also known as Plums, is a trick-taking game. You're playing these cards out for priority and choosing which of the played cards you get to keep and incorporate into your town.
Right. Yeah. And there's a tension between trying to build a card, trying to use a card to win a trick so you have the best choice, not trying to give your opponent who might really want to get this certain type of card. There's a lot going on in this one. I will say it plays better at 4 than at 3 or higher player counts. 3 was fine. I would prefer it at a higher player count than that just because it's more interesting in terms of the player order. Player order is a big part of this.
I played at 5. And it was fine at 5. I really enjoyed this. We played at 4 previously, still haven't played it at 3, but I think I loved it at 4. And 5 is fine. It's fine. But I think, 4 is probably the sweet spot. 3 would be pretty quick. There was a little bit of downtime in 5.
I think 4 is probably, I would agree with you, is probably the sweet spot for this one. So that's Honshu. It's probably going to be played at Empire for the next few weeks for sure. I hope to get it to the table some more. and really enjoying it. Really
Yeah.
enjoying the reunion with that game.
Yes, indeed. So I also got to play some Star Wars Destiny. So for some of you, go ahead and just fast forward about 90 seconds, maybe. I won't talk about it too long.
I might cut you off sooner than that.
Wow.
This has got to stop.
Well, I'm not going to talk about this every week, but I got my first actual games since I've opened my Spirit of Rebellion boosters. And I built 2 decks. I built a Emperor Palpatine with the Royal Guard, and I built a Shiro Timway with Baze Malbus.
And a Jar Jar Binks deck.
I did not build a Jar Jar Binks deck, in fact, and it doesn't exist. So moving on.
Hopefully, maybe they should make that exist.
If they made Jar Jar Binks a legendary in an upcoming set, and that's like one of the legendaries you open, people will rage. They will just rage.
What if they made him OP?
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I'm really enjoying this game. We reviewed this. When I say we, I mean me and Rob from Blue Peg Pink Peg reviewed this a couple weeks ago. And then we've done some YouTube stuff for it. And I think that's primarily where most of our Destiny coverage will be in the future, is on YouTube. Because Alex has no interest and it's got a...
I feel like I have to try it at some point.
I think you will enjoy it well enough. I was surprised you liked Netrunner as much as you did.
I enjoyed Netrunner.
But you're not going to enjoy deck construction aspect of games like this. So
not usually.
So that's fine. That's fine. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this Palpatine build. And in fact, Nick and I are going to kind of gear up to go play in some of the tournaments at Gen Con in August. So we're going to play competitively. Nick just bought a 3rd box of Rebellion because he's as big a degenerate as I am. So yeah, we both kind of started working on a similar build independently of each other. And now we're kind of working on it together. And once we realize that, oh, hey, we're trying to do this.
How's your Palpatine voice?
It's cool. No, I can't do it. You put me on the spot.
You can't do it anyway, even if you're not on the spot.
Oh, it's quite operational. No? What's your Palpatine voice? You can't do it either. Get off my back. How dare you?
Oh, I assure you it is fully operational.
No, that's terrible too.
Yours is even worse.
No, ours are equally terrible.
Oh, this is like the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing all over again.
Your Arnold's fine. You have a fine Arnold.
Okay.
Mine is not so good. I can. So I used to be able to do impressions really well. And then something happened like 10 years ago. And no.
Something, dark side.
Yeah, that's kind of the caricature of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, Spirit of Rebellion, don't bother trying to go find it because it's already sold out. Fantasy Flight, what are you doing?
Because Sean bought all the booster boxes.
I bought all of them. I bought 12,000 booster boxes.
And then Nick bought the others.
Bought the other 3, yes.
All right.
No, but yeah, so the Awakenings, which is the original set, their booster boxes are supposed to be available that come June. So I'm going to pick up one more box of that, which I think should kind of round me out. And then between Nick and Rory, 3 of us really, will be able to kind of swap cards as we need to build decks. And then we'll see what our build's going to be like for Gen Con. But I'm very excited to play competitively again in this type of game. So that's Star Wars Destiny. That was longer than 90 seconds. Go to YouTube, check out Star Wars Destiny content.
Excellent. Next one I'll talk about is one that has been pretty hot at Empire of late, actually, and it's a cooperative game. The Banishing. This is sort of in a word, the new Grizzled in a way. You're working together. Everyone has different powers, more distinguished powers than in something like the Grizzled, where the powers that you have are pretty generic for the most part, at least in the base game.
Right, without the expansion, I believe.
And I don't know what the expansion... I have not played with Your Orders.
I own it. Have yet to play it.
Shelf of Shame.
Yep.
The Banishing, you are trying to banish a certain number of cards to basically get them out of the game. They can be demons. They can be red, blue, or green cards. The cards themselves are arranged in this grid of 9, and you're supposed to take rows and then manipulate things. But if you take too much damage, if someone dies or everyone's exhausted, you lose the game. We won our first game, by the way, playing this at 5 players. It's typically very difficult, but at least from our plays of it at 5, people seem to be having pretty good success playing this one at 5 players. At lower player counts, I hear it gets devilishly difficult. So I enjoy it, but I think I like the Grizzled better. There's something about the nature of the not being able to talk about your hand, that sort of oh no moment, that feeling like you're in the trenches and kind of getting worn down by war, the interesting hard knocks cards of the Grizzled. I tended to enjoy that more in terms of how it felt to play than the Banishing, which is a really interesting, well-done puzzle, if that makes any sense. So, Sean, have you played the Banishing yet?
I have. In fact, I talked about it last week or the week before. I think I talked about it while you were on the show.
It's probably so. I don't ever listen to this stuff. Anyway.
As we're recording, you don't listen.
No, not usually.
It's not just that you don't listen to it after. It's that while I'm speaking.
Sean, I'm the only important person on this podcast. We both know that.
Well, you're usually like Facebook messaging people.
I am not Facebook messaging anyone.
Right, the second. But I'm saying that's probably what you were doing.
No,
you're probably
no.
Facebook messaging some new friend of yours.
Whoa, hey. All right.
What?
Back to you, Sean. What else have you been playing?
So we got an advanced copy of a new game from Osprey Games. And let me say real quick, Osprey Games, who they've done a bunch of different war games. My exposure to them growing up was through these different source books, these like military history source books. And anytime I would go into a hobby shop or a bookstore, there was always like a very limited quantity of them. And I'd always pick them up. They were like $10, $12, something like that. And it was like, here's the Roman legions from 200 BC to 100 BC, something like that. Or here's, the Luftwaffe camo schemes or whatever. So I always enjoyed picking those up and reading those. And that's been my exposure to Osprey for the most part. Well, in the last year or so, they have been kind of making a push into hobby board games. Now, we've seen kind of some other stuff like Escape from Colditz from them, but the Ravens of Three Shahrazad, which is a beautiful looking game, which I have upstairs, haven't played it. Raquel is jonesing to play it because it looks so pretty, and it really does. So yeah, they're kind of making this push into hobby board games, and I'm liking what they're seeing. So they reached out to us and wanted to see if they could send us some stuff, and I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So they sent us an advanced copy of Shahrazad. Okay.
We went over this,
We went over this. And so she is the source of the 1001 Arabian Nights. Basically, she was a concubine or new wife of the Sultan, and he killed a wife every night. And so she said, oh, I'll entertain him with a story. And so she told them for 1001 Nights. And then eventually he's like, oh, she's a treasure. She tells me these great stories. So he kept her alive. That's how it goes.
Sean, are you a fan of Aladdin, the movie?
The movie? Sure. We're not going to go into
Shahrazad is referenced in Friend Like Me, the hit sung by the genie.
Excellent.
Shahrazad had 1,000 tales. But Master, you're in luck because up my sleeve, got a brand of magic that never fails.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So anyway, in this game, it's a 1 to 2 player game, and you are laying tiles. It's a tile laying game, and they are numbered from 0 to 20, and they're one of 4 different colors: yellow, blue, red, and black. And on them are these beautifully illustrated images from a bunch of different fairy tales, folklore, etc., from all different cultures. So it's not just the Arabian Nights. And so what you're trying to do is you're laying out this pattern, and you want it to go in ascending order from left to right, but you can only have a certain number of tiles per column, and there's some restrictions on how you can play them. And eventually, once you place out all the tiles, if you have some tiles that are out of order, then you're going to have to flip them over, and they're going to get removed from the game. They're going to be negative points. But ultimately, you're trying to create adjacent sets of the same color, because you're going to score more points if you have a bunch of reds clumped together and blues clumped together. So it's an interesting choice between, okay, I need to make sure this is in the correct order when we're done, but at the same time, I need to make sure that they're clumped together. Now, I think just from the way I'm describing this, it sounds really easy and simple. And I know when I was reading the rules, I'm like, oh, there's nothing to this game. No, this was really good. Rory and I played it. We kind of broke off from the rest of the group, and I said, hey, let's play this. And he had a similar feeling. He's like, oh, this is going to be nothing. You're making this out to be too much. I'm like, I don't know. Let's give it a shot. It was tough. It was some interesting decisions. We did fairly well, and you have a limited table talk, so you can't say what you have in your hand. So I have a hand of 2 tiles, and you have a hand of 2 tiles. We can't say what's in them, but once we decide what we can play, we can have some table talk about where we want it to go. So you're either placing a tile on your turn, or you're replacing a tile, which sounds fine, except that now you're going to have 3 tiles in hand on your next turn, and you have to place out 2 tiles. There are some times you're like, I don't want to place out this tile right now, because maybe all you have is like the 15 to 20 clump, and you have like a 2 and a 3. And if you have to place that 2 and the 3 down close to like a 14, it's going to be out of order, and you're going to have to deal with that or give up points or whatever. This is going to be available actually right around the time this episode drops. Like I said, we got an advanced copy. I would definitely go check this out. I really did enjoy this. This is a perfect like date night game or couples game. Beautiful art. It's simple. The rule set is simple, but I think it's got some decent depth. This was designed by Yu Agasawara. On the box, he goes by Yuo, Y-U-O, and beautiful art by Katori Neko. So I definitely recommend checking that out. So that's Shahrazad from Osprey Games.
Very good. Final one I'll talk about is one we got in together, Sean, and this is a game called Skull King.
Not like skulking in the shadows.
No.
But the King of Skulls.
The King of Skulls, the Skull King.
Bow before me.
Fear me and my skulls. I have so many of them. At least 3.
That's really all you need, right?
That's all he needs.
No, I'm just saying, like...
He doesn't have... What does he have to prove? He's the Skull King.
Actually, I think the number would be, the cutoff would be like 17. Once you own 17 skulls, then you're probably in the running for Skull
Now you're
King.
overcompensating.
Okay.
Yeah.
What?
You're just too many skulls at that point. It's like owning 17 cars. You own too many cars.
I don't think skulls and cars are the same. Why don't you tell us about Skull King, Alex?
So this is a trick-taking bidding game that Sean is bad at.
Yeah, so bad
Sean
at.
is so bad at. It's similar, if anyone out there who's listening to this has played Wizard, this game is very, very, very similar to Wizard.
Or, oh, hell, and let me just interject real quick.
Sure.
I picked this up from recommendations from a bunch of people, including Dan King, the Game Boy Geek, because when Tony McRee from Rolling Dice Taking Names was on, he talked about playing Oh Hell, and people piped in like, oh, hey, you should check out Skull King. But make sure you get the right version of Skull King.
Yes, as opposed to Skull and Roses or Skull or
No.
else.
I think it's the Schmidt version. There's a couple different versions out there. And so this is the quote-unquote correct version.
Okay. So in Skull King, basically, you'll play this over the course of 10 rounds. Each round, you'll get one more card. The number of cards corresponds to the round that you're in. So 1 card in the first round, 10 cards in the last round. You, when you see your cards, are going to bid how many tricks you think you will take in that round. There's a whole suit of trump. There's mermaids. Mermaids are beat trump and anything else, but are beaten by pirates. Pirates are beaten by the Skull King. The Skull King is beaten by our mermaid. And that's sort of the chain of things at the top and how those special cards... Yeah, the hierarchy of how cards can take each other. If you've played Wizard, that's a little more than is in Wizard. I can't remember exactly what the hierarchy is at the top there, but it's nowhere near that complicated. This is quite fun. And if you like Wizard and that style of game, if you enjoy... Effectively, you're trying to place a bid and get that bid right. If you get that bid wrong, you lose points. If you get that bid right, you'll get a bunch of points.
Number of tricks won.
Correct. And for instance, if you're like Sean and bid 0 every round, you're shooting really high. You're trying to... If you bid 0 in round 7, say, you're eligible for 70 points, but you might also lose 70 points. So, yeah, we played this one with 4 players and... Pretty close game, pretty close finish, not for Sean.
No, not for me.
Sean did badly. But it was a good amount of fun. Yeah, I think you really liked this one, Sean.
I loved it. I think this was fantastic. I don't know where this game has been all my life. This is a fantastic trick-taking game. I am terrible at it, but I'm okay with it because it's a lot of fun. And it's cool because you're not trying to win as many tricks as possible necessarily. You're trying to win the amount that you bid. And so that creates interesting tension where it's like, oh, I don't want to win this, so here's this terrible card. I really enjoyed it.
It certainly looks more interesting than something like Wizard on the table. Wizard is fairly generic. I think it's an older game. I don't know exactly when it came out. It looks better on the table. I think the overcomplication of the hierarchy at the top has me prefer Wizard as a game.
That's not that bad. That's not that bad.
I enjoy this game as well, though, and it works really well. So that's Skull King, a strong recommendation from Sean. And yeah, if you like that, if any of that sounds interesting to you, yeah, certainly check that one out. So that's what we played this past week. Now on to the news. All right, this week we're talking about an expansion for a game that neither of us have played, but both of us should have. Star Wars Rebellion has an expansion coming out, Rise of the Empire. Sean, can you do this description in your Palpatine voice, please?
No, I absolutely cannot. So let me just say, though, that there is a good chance that both of us will be playing Star Wars Rebellion in the coming days, just not with each other.
Yeah.
So my buddy Ellie, who is one of my oldest gaming partners, I've known him since middle school, he is driving through New Mexico. He's moving his family from Florida back to Phoenix, and he's going to be here Saturday. And we're going to play this, and then we're going to play a bunch of other games. So hopefully by the time this episode airs, I will have played Star Wars Rebellion, and you're trying to get a game of it tomorrow.
And part of it was I was trying to play it before you did, because I thought that would have been awesome, but it just never worked out. I'm bummed. If Empire had it in the library, I think I would have gotten it in before you, maybe. But
you throwing shade at Empire now?
No. I'm not throwing shade at anyone. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Oh, if only they had a complete library.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Anyway, Rise of the Empire is the new expansion that should be coming out sometime in the third quarter. And much like Spirit of Rebellion is to Destiny, this is to Rebellion, in the sense that this is heavily influenced by the Rogue One movie. You can add Jyn Erso to the Rebels. You can add Director Krennic to the Imperials. And it's going to feature some stuff from that period leading up to episode 4. So there's Death Troopers, there's the U-Wing, the TIE Striker, lots of stuff for this. It's, what's kind of interesting about Rebellion, as I understand it, is that you have all these elements of the original trilogy, the Tridge, and you kind of mix them up and they come out in a different order or something. And now it's kind of taking that to another extreme because you're adding in now a prequel, essentially. Not the prequels, but a prequel, so to speak. So yeah, this sounds interesting. I mean, it's a Fantasy Flight game. Fantasy Flight makes expansions. That's what they do. You knew this was going to happen, people.
This sounds like it's going to add some cool stuff. Rogue One was an awesome movie, and to be able to play out scenarios from that should add a good amount. So I think this will be a worthy expansion. I'm excited to hopefully play the base game soon, and then the expansion soon after that comes out.
So be it, Jedi.
That was better.
That was good? Was that good?
I don't know about good, but it was better.
All right.
For sure. All right, next up, we're talking about the Origins Awards. We've got the nominees out for this one, Sean, and I'm curious how this stacks up compared to Dice Tower Awards, which we'll be voting on. In fact, big part of the reason I'm playing Star Wars Rebellion is I got to vote in that thing at some point in the next few weeks. So, Sean, what are we talking about in terms of nominations?
Well, so of course, Origins is, a big fair early in the summer, and it is about 3 weeks away right now. And these all get voted on by the Academy of Adventure Gaming Arts and Design. But there's also kind of like a fan award that people at attending Origins are able to vote on. So I just kind of want to highlight 2 different categories. There's several different categories. There's like role-playing games. There's some card games and whatnot. But so you've got family games, which includes the Cartoon Network crossover crisis deck building, Garbage Day by Mayday Games, Happy Salmon, Alex, Distance Happy Salmon.
Oh, wow. With some Foley work there.
Yeah.
Yeah, good work.
Yeah, or you could just...
That's a self-salmon.
Self-salmon?
You can't do that. That's outside the spirit of the game.
Junk Art by Pretzel Games, Karuba by Haba, and then Speechless by Arcane Wonders, which is a Mike Elliott design, interesting little party game there. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty solid family list. Any thoughts there? What you would prefer?
Happy Salmon.
Okay.
The answer if Happy Salmon is in the category is Happy Salmon.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Best war game, Happy Salmon.
Happy Salmon.
How did this get nominated in the first place?
It's because of me.
And then their board game awards, they've got 10 different nominees. They've got Blood Rage, Clank, Cry Havoc, Feast for Odin, Islebound, Mansions of Madness, Scythe, Star Wars Rebellion, Terraforming Mars, and then World's Fair 1893. And I think that's a pretty solid list of games.
Yeah, I would agree.
So,
and I think out of that list, I would still call the favorite Scythe. But that's mainly because it's my favorite. Terraforming Mars will be a contender. With Blood Rage in this mix, Blood Rage, I think, adds an interesting wrinkle to this, too.
Well, it's kind of, odd because Blood Rage was last...
It's such an old game.
Last award year. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I don't know. But they'll be announcing those on Saturday, June 17th at Origins. So definitely go check it out. I think that the Origins Awards has kind of gained some credibility in the recent years. And I think this is a solid list. So
very nice. Final thing we're talking about this week is a Kickstarter, as we always do. This is Card City XL. It's an Alban Viard game, Sean.
Yes.
And you have become a fan of his.
No.
What?
I am a fan in waiting. I guess I'll put it that way. So I've only ever played one game of his, and that is Town Center. I feel like I could be a fan of his if I would just get some of these games played. So I think that needs to happen. I did back this. Now, there are 240 different ways to play this game. And what's interesting, Card City XL, CCXL, is the Roman numeral for 240. Ooh.
Oh.
Basically, you have different levels of complexity you can choose. There are some different endgame objectives you can choose. And then there are some different variants that make it 240 different ways to play it. They did differentiate this on the Kickstarter page. It's not like 504 and that there are 504 different games. It's all the same game, just with different goals, different variants, things like that. So from what I understand of this, it's similar to a lot of other Alban VR games where you are basically drafting from a pool of available cards, and it's kind of an I split, you choose mechanic. And you're putting them in your city area, your own personal city tableau, and there are specific rules as far as how you're supposed to place things. So like you can't have industry cards next to commercial areas. And then once you place everything appropriately, I think you have to pay for it. And then based on what's placed next to what, is going to generate a certain amount of revenue. So there's definitely less efficient and more efficient ways to place things, which generates revenue, which you'll be able to use to further build your town. What's interesting is there's also some split cards. So it could be either split diagonally or split, I guess, orthogonally. And so it kind of has different uses depending on which way it's oriented. I'm really excited for this. Like I said, I pledged this. It's the U.S. amount, because I think it's in euros. The U.S. amount is $29 for the base pledge plus $6 shipping. And yeah, to me, that's the right price for this type of game. So I happily pledge that. It ends May 31st, 2017. So you got some time.
This year, not next year.
Thank you. So Alex, you played Town Center and you were kind of so-so on it.
Yeah.
You seemed to enjoy it well enough when we played.
It was all right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not. This isn't something I'd back.
You know who I'm not going to play this game with?
Me?
No. What? No.
Oh, who?
Yeah, I'll play with you.
Oh.
I can play with Max.
Okay.
Because
Max is really good. He's an
really
engineer.
Good.
Yeah.
He was really good at Town Center, so he's probably going to be really good with this. So I am never playing this with you, Max.
More Max-related content coming quite soon in the show. Because I played Yokohama with Max twice. And we're reviewing it this week.
Excellent.
Anyway, I felt the burn of the engineering mind of Santa Fe Max.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. We'll talk about that soon.
Okay.
Anyway, onto the Kickstarter. It's funded, so it's happening. And you have until the end of the month to back it if you'd like to. That's Card City XL.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for our Kickstarter, and that's going to do it for our Look at the News. In these turbulent times, you can't just let yourself become adrift in the flow of history. Instead, you need to
Wait. Hang on.
Yeah.
Aside from your presidential speech here, Sean, and this isn't Independence Day, so ease up. That sounded like an interesting name for a game there, Flow of History. Is that being done yet?
Yeah, but there's no aliens involved like Independence Day.
Oh, okay.
So Flow of History is yet another innovative game designed from Taiwanese designer Jesse Lee, who also designed Ponzi Scheme. This is a civilization game where players are developing their nation using a unique bidding and price-setting mechanism to purchase new cards. But what is paid to the supply might also be harvested into the pockets of other players later, which puts a bit of a twist on your strategy for bidding and also cleverly simulates an economic inflation for the game.
Flow of History is up on Indiegogo right now.
Tasty Minstrel Games recently moved their Flow of History campaign from Indiegogo to Kickstarter.
It's being done by Tasty Minstrel Games. You can check out that game and all of TMG's awesome titles at playtmg.com. Have you ever dreamed of wandering the streets of Japan, scooping up fish, scooping up copper, grabbing every bit of tea you can find? Well, most people probably haven't, but if you'd like to experience it, there's a board game for that. It's Yokohama.
Once Yokohama was just a fishing village, but now, at the beginning of the Meiji era, it's becoming a harbor open to foreign countries and one of the leading trade cities of Japan. As a result, many Japanese products, such as copper and raw silk, are collected in Yokohama for export to other countries. At the same time, the city is starting to incorporate foreign technology and culture, with even the streets becoming more modernized. In the shadow of this development was the presence of many Yokohama merchants.
Yokohama is designed by Hisashi Hayashi and published by Tasty Minstrel Games. In Yokohama, each player is a merchant in the Meiji period, trying to gain fame from a successful business, and to do so, they need to build a store, broaden their sales channels, learn a variety of techniques, and, of course, respond to trade orders from abroad. This will all translate into victory points at the end of the game.
Players manage a number of assistants and their president. At the start of a turn, players may place 2 to 3 of their assistants onto the various tile spaces that make up the modular main board. Then the player's president must move to another tile space as long as they can trace a path through tile spaces that contain their assistants, and they don't end in a tile space with another player's president. Then that player will take the action of the space, depending on how much power they can muster, which will include the president themselves, plus any assistants that are present, plus any buildings the player has already built on that location. The more power they have, the greater benefit the player receives from that action space.
There are a variety of action spaces, including ones that provide the 4 basic resources of the game, spaces that provide money, spaces that give you access to additional assistance in buildings, spaces that can give you technology upgrades, spaces that provide foreign orders to fulfill later, and several others.
Players will gain bonuses throughout the game by being the first player in a given space to muster 5 power, or by building buildings on the various spots. Players will also be able to break certain rules in the game by acquiring various technologies. They can also gain influence at the church or customs house, which are also some endgame majority control areas. And of course, the contracts to fulfill various orders will also yield bonuses and victory points.
The game will continue until one of several different victory conditions are met, either placing all of one's building shops or trading houses, placing a certain number of assistants on the majority control boards, or running out of contracts. There's some additional endgame scoring that will occur, and then whoever has the most points is the winner, and that's mostly how you play Yokohama.
All right, Alex, so this game, when I first saw it, seemed really overwhelming.
Oh man.
Was that the case for you, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
So here's the difference when I see that versus you see that. And you tell me if you think I'm right or not, or whatever. So when I see that and it looks overwhelming, I get really excited. And I'm like, I can't wait to figure out how to unpack this game. Is that your experience?
Absolutely not. 100% not. No, it's intimidation. It's feeling intimidated by the game. And I definitely, when I saw this one for the first time, I had just gotten off of a flight, landed at Dice Tower Con?
Dice Tower Con.
Yep. Got my correct con that time. I was intimidated. I walked in and I think it was you, Raquel, and a couple of other folks.
It was Ellie and Max.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's right, Max. All 4 of you guys were playing, and I saw this, and I was like, I'm going to go do something else. Because it looked very intense.
It definitely looks overwhelming. So my first play of this was, as you described, it was at Dice Tower Con, and it was at the Tasty Minstrel booth, and they were running us through the game. It was actually on Kickstarter, the deluxe version. So this was the Japanese import. And I remember seeing it for the first time and being like, holy cow, there is so much you can do in this game. There's the way the different tiles, the different location tiles, they need to be distinct from one another. You need to be able to recognize quickly and easily which does what, which also kind of creates a bit of a jarring visual presence. But my general thoughts when I first played this game was, holy cow, this game is awesome. And it's very much a typical gather resources, have them fulfill contracts, gain some different benefits, a little bit of engine building, not a lot. I wouldn't say it's a strong engine building game, but some of those different technologies, like you'll gain certain points for doing certain things, or you'll gain money for doing other certain things, kind of drives you down a particular path.
Yeah.
But speaking of driving down a particular path, I think there are multiple paths to victory in this game. And so there's a little bit of it's not a true sandbox by any way, shape, or form, but it's pretty open in terms of what you can do. And I don't think it necessarily points you in any one direction.
Certainly, it will point you in some directions, but it won't point you in just one.
Sure.
If that makes any sense. And we'll talk a little bit more about how it drives you down that path. I think it's important, for full disclosure, for if you haven't heard at any point during the show so far, we are sponsored by Tasty Minstrel Games,
Correct,
who put this game out. They've not told us anything about how to review games or score games or any of that sort of thing. But I think that's important to always get out there on the table. Full disclosure, they are paying us money to help put on the podcast. We wanted to review this game anyway. It's pretty hot in the board game scene at the moment.
Yeah, I Kickstarted this. I played this before they were ever a sponsor. I loved it my first play. I backed it on Kickstarter. This was a Kickstarter copy. So it's not a review copy, but yes, full disclosure, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. So let's get into the review, Sean.
Yeah.
Rulebook.
Yes. I think it's a solid rulebook. I think that Tasty Minstrel has been doing a pretty good job of their rulebooks. This was something that I could have been concerned about. Like, for example, Trick of the Rails, another Hayashi game, kind of had a little bit of a rough rulebook. This is a much more complex game, but I think it did a good enough job in laying things out. I will say that Paul Grogan did a fantastic video. And you watched that, right?
That's how I learned this game.
Yeah.
So props to Paul Grogan. It taught me the game very well. When Matthew was kind of running through a lot of things, with some very minor exceptions, I knew what was going on. And the minor exceptions were, if I'd watched the video a second time or just absorbed better, I would have understood. And I, for the most part, understood what can be a tricky game to get.
Sure.
So, no, Paul did a fantastic job on that video. And if you're going to dig into this game for the first time, I would strongly recommend watching that video before playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It'll give you a sense of what you're up to. So well done, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the rulebook was great for going back and referencing things. There's some, not glossary stuff, but some reference stuff in there. I think it's a solid rulebook. So now, components. There are 2 different sets of components we have to look at here, right? I have the deluxe edition, and then there's also the retail edition. And the difference is in the retail edition, you have cubes for your assistants. You have, I forget, what's the president? Is it just a meeple?
It's a big meeple that you put a sticker on.
No. No. Oh, in the base game?
In the base game. On the base game, it's a larger pawn.
It's a larger pawn, sure. And then you have your different shops and your trading houses, which are these little cutouts, these little cardboard cutout or punch outs. And it's fine. I think it's a fine production. Also, the different resources are more cardboard punch outs. I think it's a great production. However, you have deluxe version, I have the deluxe version.
You don't have the deluxe version, probably.
So the deluxe version replaces
the
the assistant cubes with little meeples. And then there's a big meeple for your president, which has this cool little sticker you put on the front and back. It has wooden blocks. They're shaped like the, house shaped for the trading houses and the shops. And then it has really nice animeeples or vegemeeples or whatever you want to call them for the different resources. And then metal coins.
Yes.
It's a fantastic production. It is a great deluxe production, and I think it's fantastic.
Some quibbles.
Oh, interesting.
In the deluxe edition, and this was actually pointed out in our guild, and I verified this, the stickers that go on the scoring markers are not properly sized.
You are correct. Yes,
they are not properly sized. And in general, by the way, not a big fan of stickers. I'm not. If only because my fine motor control isn't so great, and I don't get them on there as well, and it's always like a little off, and you can't always fix it so well. So I'm not a fan of stickers, but in this case, the stickers for the scoring markers do not fit properly.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. And I will point out that there's not a lot of stickering you have to do here compared to, say, like Orleans Deluxe, where you were stickering all of the different worker discs. This, you're stickering a couple different square pieces and the president. Not a lot.
Your sticker sheet for that was fairly small.
I don't mind it. Now, if you want to sticker, say, Terror in Meeple City, holy cow. Or Rampage.
I don't want to sticker anything, Sean.
No, that was a lot of stickering, a lot of meeples. But anyway, yeah, that's true. I did forget about that, and I agree. That was I was like, oh, okay. I mean, it's an easy fix. You just cut it, but still, it's a little annoying.
Yeah,
you can't handle a pair of scissors either, so
don't trust me around sharp objects, Sean.
No.
So, and I like a lot of this game, and we'll get into a lot of why I like this game and gameplay innovation. In components art, there are some things that bugged me about this one.
Really?
Yes.
All right.
I agree with you that, for instance, the components are really nice, especially even in the base edition, they're fine.
I think both sets are really
Deluxe
good.
or base, I think, are fine. The chits that you use for the 5 power actions, which are important in the context of this game, I think are solidly done. Cards are of good quality, generally. Here are a couple of issues. One, the card sizes for the tech cards, I really want those bigger. I can't read them from a distance. You have to lean over. You have to go across the table and look closely. I'm not a fan of that.
It's a table hog. The game is already a table hog.
I get it.
And so what I've done is I've just said, okay, let's go through all the different technologies. Let's read them out loud. When a new one comes up, here it is. I get the point, but yeah, sure.
It's tough to read a lot of that info because it's such a table hog, it's likely not going to be close to everyone or convenient for everyone to read.
Sure.
So I think that's an issue. I think from a distance as well, the symbols for a lot of the countries can blur together.
Sure, I could see that.
It can be hard to distinguish.
Well, real quick, so let's just point out that the different technologies and then the different contract cards are going to have
a nation associated with them.
Yeah, a different colonial power, essentially. And you're trying to collect these. There's an endgame scoring set collection element there, but then there's also, whenever you collect 2 of a kind, you get a foreign agent, which kind of gives you a bonus turn.
It can be super powerful.
Sure.
And because that piece of things is so important, I just wish those things were clearer.
Okay.
The other thing is in a 3 or 4 player game, you play with a port and a dock, which gives you 2 separate sets of orders that you can possibly fill. I like that, by the way. I was thinking after my 3 player play of this, I played this for reference for the podcast, 3 players and 2 players. I think, Sean, you've played this at 4.
Yeah, I played it at 2, 3, and 4.
So Sean's played it at every player count. I've just played it at 2 and 3. I don't think I'd like it at 4. We'll get into more about why that is later. At 3 players, I was thinking, well, couldn't you have just one long board with port and dock that just combined both tracks and you just have double options? I actually like that you have different options in different places. I think that's fine. I wish the colors of the boards are different between the port and the dock. I wish they were more different. I wish they were wildly different because the iconography on the rest of the board is the same. To distinguish between the two and then match them up with the board that they correspond to, there were times where it was easy to forget which one you were targeting or which one you were going to. So I wish that was more easily differentiated. That ended up being an annoyance during gameplay for me.
Okay.
I think in general, the iconography is fairly clear. The one that says take stuff out of your warehouse, I wish it was something besides just that one house that represents one piece on your board. I wish it was some way of mixing or matching and showing you could take different things off the board. So there's some minor iconography things. There's some minor things with components to me. It's nothing that's huge, but there are things that ended up annoying me over the course of the gameplay.
And let me just go back and explain that real quick.
Sure.
So you start the game with a certain number of assistants and then a certain number of shops.
Right.
You have a player board where you are able to, throughout the course of the game, access additional assistants, additional shops, and then your 4 trading houses. But you have to take actions to actually remove those and sometimes pay for those pieces to come into your available pool.
What I like is, for the most part, by the way, that shows you endgame scoring, and it has a lot of great information on one nice little player board.
Right. It's got endgame
that
scoring.
Piece of it's great.
And it's also got the phase order at the top of the player board.
Which I think is a great way of reminding yourself of what order everything goes in, because that can be important in this game, and how a turn is structured. I think all of that's well done. I just wish some of that, the iconography tied in a little clearer to what you're actually doing when you pull stuff out of the warehouse. Because it just shows the shop coming out of the warehouse with that action tile. And it makes you think, oh, well, is it just the shop? No, it's not. It's more than that. It's a person, it's a shop, or it's a trading house. It can be any number of things. Something that would have denoted that might have been better to me. It's minor stuff. None of this is game-breaking by any means. But
I'll call that your quibbliest quibble.
That's my quibbliest?
Yes.
I think I've had far more quibbly ones.
No, I'm saying of all of your quibbles
Yes.
here, that was your quibbliest.
Probably. Anyway, so I wouldn't call it perfect by any means, but I'd say by and large, it looks good on the table, and it looks overwhelming on the table.
Absolutely.
When you don't understand what's going on, it all comes together fairly well, I think, in terms of the production piece of it. So the components art, I think for the most part were a success, but there are some things that irked me.
Okay, so let's talk about gameplay. So obviously you approach this game, it looks overwhelming. Did you find that it actually came together immediately or halfway through a game?
After playing one game of this at 3 players, so for folks who don't know our scoring system, we range from a 1 to a 6. I was at about a 3, somewhere in the 3 ballpark. That's below the range where it's not as bad as a typical, for most rating systems, if that would be like a 4 on a 10-point scale. It's not that bad.
Okay.
No, but I mean, in terms of if it's below half for folks who don't know our scale.
Sure.
That's where I was. I was frustrated with how the game ended, and it clicked to some degree. I was competitive in the game. It wasn't something I enjoyed the puzzle of so much. I'm glad I played it more times, because it definitely grew on me, and I appreciated the game more as I played it. I didn't appreciate the game less as I played it. It didn't outstay its welcome. I got in plays of this, and I was enthusiastic to get in the plays of this. This wasn't a drag to get in the plays of. So I think it's one that can be trickier to get into. I think things like Paul Grogan's video to help understand it help. And I think going into your first game with an understanding similar to, say, one of our favorites, Matainai, if you go in, I'm not saying it's, by the way, anywhere near that level of crazy complexity on a first play, and they're not similar games by any stretch, to be clear.
Okay.
More the idea of, if you can go in there with the attitude of, I may not get all of this on the first play, but it's something might click during this first play, and I'll be fine. I think you're going to be better off, because I think there's a lot to appreciate about this game that takes just a little bit of investment to get to.
Sure. And I think that for the most part, once I understood the basic rules, once I understood how, you're placing your assistants every turn and you're trying to build up certain spots, right? Like, for example, if you want to take a high value money action, you're going to maybe spend one turn placing a cube on, or an assistant on that spot, and you're placing them elsewhere because eventually you're going to be taking those other actions. So you have the option in a turn of placing 3 assistants on 3 different locations, or you could place 2 on a given location. So you are definitely planning ahead, but more so than just planning which actions you want to take, you also have to think of that path that you want your president to travel across. So maybe I have to put down a single cube in a spot, or a single assistant, where I don't actually care about that action right now, but to get my president from point A to point B, I need to do that. And then on top of it, I also have to worry about, am I placing my assistant in a spot with another player's president? Because then I have to pay them money. Or am I going to have to move my president through a player's president? Because then I'm going to have to pay the money. So there's so many different considerations there. And once I feel like you have somewhat of a grasp on that basic, here's how I move, here's how I place assistants, here's how I take an action. And you're able to then kind of say, okay, well, now here's how I need to plan out for the next couple turns. So, I mean, I'm usually planning out like, okay, I'm going to do these 4 things. So before I can do this, I have to do this, and then I have to do this first, then et cetera, et cetera. I love it. I love it when I can have kind of operational planning, which is kind of like in between strategic and tactical. But then there's also a tactical element, because maybe on this particular turn, I was definitely planning for this to happen, but you moved into that spot, or, someone moved in my way and I can't afford to pay them. So now I have to tactically respond and do something that's not going to be a complete waste. That's rough. I mean, that's kind of, in and of itself, that's a lot to handle when you're first learning this game.
Yes. And there's a workforce management piece of this that can become tricky too, and a building management piece where you have to go to that one spot to make sure you have enough workers to do things, because you might straight up run out. A lot of times workers will get promoted to different tracks or to different objectives, which are important for scoring you points and getting rid of export goods, processing through the flow of the game. But you got to get those guys out of your warehouse, and it takes some planning to do that. So there's a good amount of trying to maneuver and get around things as best as you possibly can. That minor engine building comes into play where, well, I don't have very many workers, but at least I have some presence here. I've already built a house. That lets me do a higher valued action in this spot. And building your houses in a way to where you make sure they're helping you do actions you think you might be doing repeatedly over the course of that game.
And that's the other cool thing too, is so you're kind of racing to get to that level, because it's powers 1 through 5, right? Or power 1 through 5. And you're trying to get to 4 and 5. You want to get to 5 because there's some sort of one-time bonus if you're the first person to reach 5 on a given tile. But at 4, you're eligible to now place one of your shops or trading houses. And sometimes that's a tough choice too. You're like, well, I could take this 4 action now, so I can be the first to place a house here, because there's
certain bonuses, right?
Yeah, there's 4 different spots to put houses. And some of them have no bonus. Some of them are points. Some of them are resources, whatever. And so you're saying to yourself, okay, do I want to just take the 4 now so I can take this really nice bonus spot with my shop? Or do I want to wait to hit 5 so I can get the bonus and place the house where I want it? But this person already has 3 power there. Maybe if they place another assistant down and then move their president, they're going to beat me to that 5 anyway. I should just take the 4 power and get the shop spot that I want.
What I appreciate about this game is it can seem overwhelming and unclear what to do, especially at the very, very start of the game. What I like is it gives you an order card that helps steer that direction. It has objectives out there. The objectives, by the way, all variable. And we'll talk about variability here in a bit, which I think is a key part of this game.
Sure.
All of those things can help steer you in a possible direction in terms of what should I be doing in these early turns? What can I accomplish that makes sense? And then you sort of build a longer term strategy as you go, and you execute, or you do your best, and you sort of head down these different tunnels, adjusting on the fly depending on what other players do. And there's a really rewarding aspect to a lot of that, and it plays really well. This idea of variability and replayability is very well baked into this game.
So I guess kind of going down that variability path, this isn't a game where the variability makes a huge difference in the sense of a game's going to feel very different from one to the next, but it creates that kind of tactical variability. It reminds me in some ways of, say, a 5 Tribes, where, yeah, I can't tell you what was different from this game to the next game in terms of setup, but it's just creating that interesting puzzle from game to game where, yes, I can have this long-term strategy, but I have to play tactically as well.
What I'll say, though, is that the priority of different things changes depending on the game. So, for instance, the A goals. There's A, B, and C goals. There's 4 of each different type in the game. You'll play with 1 of each in a given game. The A goals tend to be acquire some amount of resources and have them stockpiled. You can claim that one and then spend the resources as you'd like. Depending on what that resource is, that prioritizes what that spot is over the course of that game. The B spots tend to be acquiring either technology, it might be acquiring 5 power bonuses, or foreign agents, I think is one of them as well. That might drive your strategy in terms of all of a sudden that becomes more of a valuable thing out on the board. The C tiles, well, okay, you need to build buildings on the pen spots. 4 pen spots. No, okay, this game it's 3, is it hammer? It's red. It's some red symbol.
There are different classifications of
different buildings,
spots.
But it steers you as to where you might want to build this game. And you can't necessarily do everything. What I've enjoyed about this game is I've played it 4 different times in preparation for this review. And every time there was something a little bit different in how I was playing it, something a little bit different in terms of the strategy. And I was using every piece of things. There wasn't a strategy I ditched or ignored at any point. And I appreciate that.
And I would say that I think you can approach this game and do a little bit of everything. and you'll be competitive. I think you can also approach this game and really specialize in one thing. So like I wanted to try a strategy last night where...
Wait, you were experimenting in the game we were playing?
Yeah, and I told you ahead of time.
This is the excuse.
Where I wanted to just focus on the church track.
Now, wait. I feel like I have to put a pause here. For the record, anytime Sean experiments, it's when he's lost to me. Anytime.
Okay, let's get a couple things clear. Mr. Goldsmith.
Yes.
In Facebook chat.
No.
Earlier in the day, let me ask the question. Your Honor, will you direct the witness to let me finish asking the question? Did I not, earlier in the Facebook chat during the day, say, I will be experimenting with a strategy, but I won't do it for your first play?
You did say that. I interpreted that to mean, Your Honor. I don't know why the witness would be questioning Your Honor.
No.
Or at all. That first play with me. Not my first play, period.
That is a distinction that was not in the chat.
All right.
No, now you're interpreting a wildly different way.
Motion for the plaintiff.
Is it, what?
I'm assuming you're the plaintiff for this one.
And is it true that I was trying to pull off an unorthodox strategy in that particular game?
What was I actually don't know what strategy you were trying to pull off.
I hardly completed any contracts. I acquired no technologies. It was just me trying to maximize the church track.
Oh, yeah. That was a little unorthodox.
Yeah. Okay. So now a jury of my peers, I guess, would conclude that, yes, that was... Anyway, sorry.
Well, you still lost, so...
I know I did lose, but not poorly.
No.
And really, the loss probably came down to you capitalizing on a game-ending move that I didn't see.
And let's talk a little bit about this. So... what I also like about this is not only the variability in terms of the setup, the mix of the map tiles we talked about, the mix of the objectives is nice in terms of what different buildings are tied to, the different 5-power actions. All of that is very variable. It's an incredibly variable game, which adds a little bit of time to set up, by the way.
Yes.
And it's not the easiest game in the world to set up in terms of time.
However, Meeple Realty will be doing an insert, I believe, at Origins.
Okay. So keep an eye out for that. I think even with an insert, it's still going to take you some time.
Sure.
So in any case, with that variability, there's also a number of ways the game can end. Run out of order cards. Basically, you need to fill up orders and you can't. That'll end the game. If someone has built all their buildings.
Well, all of one type or another.
Yes.
All of their shops or all of their trading houses.
That will end the game. Alternately, if there's enough spots on the church track or the customs track, that will end the game. And for the most part, I think that was where I saw the game trigger happen most.
Right.
Was
tracks. It? Okay. I've seen it happen a decent amount. I've seen it happen from buildings being built, from orders being fulfilled. I think it just depends. Like in that game you and I played, it wouldn't have been through the orders because I wasn't contributing to that particular
Not significantly.
endgame.
Yeah. What was interesting about how this one played out, Sean, was, and let's go back a bit, I think this game makes you feel very clever a lot of times in terms of how you can chain together actions and balance things. Hey, I moved here. I got this 5-power thing that let me complete this contract at the same time. That contract let me get a foreign agent, which I then use to do. There's any number of ways you can chain little things together that make you feel clever. And that's something we both, I think, tend to like in games. You even more so than me a lot of times.
Oh, absolutely.
This was a moment where I felt clever because I had a move where I set up, got enough stuff to put something out on the church track to trigger game end, which had both you and Eugene scrambling because as a result of that, you each had one more turn when you were hoping you Sean, needed at least 2 turns.
Well, it wasn't just that, though. It was the fact that you used a foreign agent.
Yes.
So I was like, oh, I'm fine, because even if he does it next turn, I'll still have had time to move off and do something else I needed.
Right.
And it was basically, I think I figured it was like 19 points that I lost out on because not only did you trigger the end game, but you were then blocking the spot that
you needed to go to for your last turn.
And I will say that that's something that I found a little bit frustrating, not just from that gameplay, but for whatever reason, I compare this in my mind somewhat to a game like Le Havre. And in Le Havre, in the very last round, everyone is allowed to use whatever building. There's no exclusive building usage like there is in the rest of the game. And I'm not saying that this needed that, but that could have been frustrating, especially if you've been building up for a particular move and now the game end is going to trigger. Kind of like a Scythe, the way Scythe ends. Mm-hmm. But I found this a little bit more frustrating than I did in, say, Scythe.
And I actually like the mechanic in both contexts. I like that you can be clever and trigger endgame before folks are ready. Kind of pull, as a strategy, pull the carpet out from underneath someone. Sure. Or I don't want to fall further behind or whatever else. By the way, I didn't trigger endgame because I was thinking you were about to do some big move. I'd noticed that, but I actually didn't do that sequence of events to do that. I did it more because I thought I had the best chance of winning by triggering it at that point without seeing what you were set up to do.
Yeah.
it happened to work out really well. I think we calculated it out. I still would have won by a couple points anyway. But it would have been closer.
Yeah.
It was a tense finish. One thing that does come up with the finish, and this happens in a lot of these kinds of games, especially with planning games, you can get serious AP at the end, for sure.
Sure.
I mean, it takes a while to evaluate what's the exact best move for me, especially when you have one or two turns. Depends on what you have, but that can take a little bit long. The game end, while I find it satisfying, I actually like that you can trigger it and kind of pull the carpet out, as I said. It does grind to a halt towards the end. It doesn't end super smoothly.
Yeah, but I think I'm used to that in this sort of Euro game where you're trying to maximize, you're trying to grind out those last couple points. Like, oh, well, if I do this, I'll net 7 points. If I do this, I'll net 9 points. Okay, I should do this.
Right.
So I didn't have an issue with that. Do we want to move on to theme?
We can. Yeah, I mean, that's mainly what I wanted to talk about with gameplay. Sean, I talked a lot about variability. I'm assuming you're on the same page here. I think it works really well in terms of how variable it is.
Well, yeah, like I said, I think it's variable, but it's not a big, this game feels completely different from one game to the next. It just presents a different puzzle from one game to the next.
But I like that you can attack the puzzle in different ways and still find success.
Absolutely.
What player count do you prefer this at? Where does it shine?
I don't think I have a preference.
Interesting.
I really don't. I think this was fantastic at 2. Here's the difference at 2, though. So the board gets smaller from 4 to 2. And so you have multiple spots for the different resources. You have multiple spots for the contracts and whatnot. Whereas at 2, it's a much tighter board, but there's less of you. I never felt like I was tripping over Raquel when we were playing at 2 players. At 3 and then 4 especially, even though it's a much wider board, there's a lot more exchange of money as you're moving through presidents and things like that. I was fine with some of the downtime at 4. I kind of liked that it was a little bit frustrating and having to kind of plan out, I'm going to need $2 to do this action, but I'm also going to need this dollar to pay this player, or $1 to move through the canal spot, which at 3 and 4, but you don't have at 2. It didn't feel like different games with the different player counts, but there were elements I liked at each of the player counts. 3 was very snappy. 3 was kind of a mix of the two. It was snappy enough because you have only 3 players instead of 4, but there was still a little bit of the blocking. But I liked it at all the counts. But I don't think you would like it at 4 at all.
It's not something I'm looking forward to trying or would try, I don't think. The one situation I might try it at is if everyone knows what they're doing, has played it multiple times before, not just once, multiple times before. That's the time I would try it at 4. I'm hesitant to even do that. I think it would just be, it's too much downtime. It would drag a little too much. It just wouldn't be something I'd be a super big fan of.
Okay.
So, yeah. My experience, for instance, between 2 and 3, I think both are successful player counts. I enjoyed playing at both. The big difference for me that I noticed at 2 versus 3, in 3 there's a building, I believe it's called Chinatown.
Yeah. It's not in 2 players.
It's not in 2 players.
It's a trading location.
It allows you to swap goods for money and vice versa, for the most part, buy and import good. Do you think that would be better if it were in the 2-player version, Sean?
No, not necessarily. You've got to cut something out, and I think it's kind of an extra piece that gives you more options at a higher player count.
I don't know what building I'd swap it for, so I can't say for sure that that's the best route to go or not.
Anything else removes a vital mechanic from the game.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if adding an 11th spot makes a ton of sense necessarily either. I did feel its absence, and it would have been nice to have some way to mitigate some of that stuff, but at the end of the day, I enjoyed it enough for 2 players, it wasn't that big of a deal.
And the other interesting thing, too, is because you're setting up the board so differently, that's another piece of the puzzle. You might find yourself kind of putting most of your assistants in one corner of the board, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I didn't care about Clay this entire time because none of my contracts had Clay, and now Clay is on the opposite end of the board. I need to start figuring out how to get over there and what actions I can take along the way. And
taking that planning and that movement to get yourself in position to even do that.
Right.
Which can be tricky. So, yeah, let's go to theme.
Okay.
Sean, how thematic do you feel this one is?
I'd say it's on the more thematic-y side of Euros.
Okay.
Right? I mean, I think there's definitely links between what you're doing and what it signifies in the game, that the mechanics. Did you find that you were telling more of a story with the deluxe components, with your little anthropomorphic president?
No.
No?
Nope.
Oh, I thought you would be.
No.
I thought you'd have a little voice for your president, or...
No, that would have been fun, and maybe if we were playing with 3 or 4 at the time, maybe, but I just didn't find myself doing that. I liked some of what the theme was. It was tied in, especially with technology. What the technology would match up for the most part. Ball was a technology. I don't know why that was, but I can't remember exactly what that technology does, but it was kind of a weird one. Anyway, a lot of times I didn't feel it was athematic. I wasn't upset by the theme. I wouldn't say I was telling stories or really getting into it in that way either, though.
Well, so for example, just as one example I can think of off the top of my head, the idea that as you complete certain contracts, you're pairing up your different nationality contracts, right? Or you're pairing up the technologies. In other words, you have gained enough influence among this particular nation that they're now sending out a foreign agent to kind of help you with your business.
There's no disconnect for me necessarily. It just wasn't something I connected with as well. I will say, and this happens with some games, for instance, Castles of Burgundy, sometimes it just doesn't matter.
Okay.
And for me, it just doesn't matter with this one. In some cases, like Signore, it did matter. It bugged me. It bugged the crap out of me. With this one, it doesn't affect my judgment of the game.
Okay. Fair enough. So let's head over to the Guild.
Oh man, the Guild had a lot to say about this.
Oh, sure did. So Scott Sexton says, I just hope that you don't feel compelled to say it's Istanbul on steroids. All right, Scott, I need you to calm down for a second there, buddy, because if you go back to episode 100...
I had to sit here while I did this, by the way.
About 45 weeks ago, if you go to the 23-minute, 20-second mark, this was our Dice Tower Con episode. I was describing how it was my first play of the con, it's first play of the con, and it was like my game of the con. And I said, and I quote, it's kind of like Istanbul, but kicked up 2 or 3 notches. So I'm just saying, I've been saying that for almost a year now. That's it.
Here's how he goes on and talks about his side of things. I get why the two games are compared, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive of one another either. And I think he's saying there's room in a collection for both of these.
Yeah.
The base game of Istanbul isn't very interesting, but once you open it up with both of the expansions and the Grand Bazaar variant, it becomes far more epic of a game than Yokohama. Istanbul has a better variety of actions to take, and the movement step is a bit more interesting, while Yokohama utilizes the really interesting power-up mechanism to boost your actions. Assuming you have all the expansions for Istanbul, I think that I prefer Yokohama with 2 or 3 players and Istanbul for 4+ sized games. Both games score a low 5 for me on the Ducal scale. So he enjoys both.
Sure. And I think what I'd say is the comparison here, I mean, obviously there's a ton of differences. There's thematic differences. The mechanics are incredibly different. But this uses a mechanic that I have dubbed spatial action selection. Why are you rolling your eyes? It's totally... What?
Go ahead.
It's an apt description. As far as I know, I'm the first one because I've been using this for 2 years, because I started talking about it with Istanbul. I was talking about with 5 Tribes, with Longhorn. We're talking like 2.5 years here, Alex, that I've been using this term.
Wait. Is it 2 or is it 2.5?
Between 2 and 2.5.
Okay.
It's a fine estimation of time. So,
in fairness, if you search in quotes on Google, spatial action selection, as I just did, the Dukes of Dice does come up as the number one thing.
Yes!
It's under building blocks number 4, spatial action selection.
Does it say when that was? Because I think that was our
September 7th, 2015. Less than 2 years ago.
Okay.
Sir.
All right. Fair enough. But hey, it's first on Google.
Oddly enough, the second search result is also Dukes of Dice, but for building blocks number 5, spatial action selection. So I don't know which building blocks number that is. That's an old thing we used to do.
Yeah, video. It's still on the YouTube channel. Go check it out. So yeah, I think that's the point of comparison, though, is you have these modular tiles that are action spaces, and then in different ways, you're moving your pieces around to take those different actions. So it's not like a worker placement game where you can just go wherever you want.
Can I read you, by the way, what the 5th search result says?
Sure.
It's in a review for Islebound.
Okay.
The game has what the Dukes of Dice podcast brilliantly calls spatial action selection.
Wait, who's that from?
It's a BGG review by Anthony Faber. Thanks, Anthony Faber.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
It was referencing Islebound.
Yeah.
And it was published in 2016.
So it's catching on slowly. It's taking time. So everyone
it's
out
gonna
there...
It's going to be like legacy games. It's just going to, everyone's going to use that term.
Be sure to use that term and
then send Sean money.
Yeah, we need royalties from it too. So.
Yeah. Oh boy. All right. Yeah. What were we talking about?
The Guild. Let's go back to the Guild.
Okay. Ben Coberly says, I've played Yokohama at 4, 3, and 2 player counts. I've really enjoyed each and every play, even though the first play with 4 players took 4 hours and I got a couple of rules wrong. It's just so satisfying putting your guys on the board, moving your president around, gathering resources to fill orders, and coming up with some crazy combinations to score a ton of points. The random setup has really impacted the games a lot, and I've seen spots that got a lot of action in one game get almost none in another because of where they were placed.
Yep.
And I've seen that too, I agree. I think this game will have a long-lasting impact on my collection and will get played a ton. Oh, and subsequent plays were in the 60 to 90 minute area.
Yeah, I've had some pretty quick games of this. I don't think I had anything approaching 4 hours. I think maybe 2.5 for that first 4-player game.
My first play at 3 players was the longest play I've had, and subsequent plays have gotten shorter.
So Royce Calverley says, I feel this would be a very divisive game. In our first play with 3, one player loved it, just got it, and was able to do all sorts of amazing moves and combos. One player liked it a lot, but was struggling with brain burn the entire time. And the last player never really seemed to get how to play it. Just never clicked. And they were ultimately a bit bored. It will be interesting to see how this stands up after many more plays.
It's interesting. We mentioned Scythe earlier in this review in talking about the endgame condition, but I'm thinking about why I like this one as much as I do. And I think it's because there are elements, not that it took from by any means, and they're not similar games, as I always have to say, but in terms of the engagement of the movement, the planning, how you have to kind of coordinate a limited number of workers to do what you need to do, how you have certain actions that you can take to get more workers, but some folks can have strategies that don't have that multiple paths to victory. There's a lot of things both of those games do that both resonate with me. And Scythe really, really resonated with me. So just thought I'd throw that out there. That kind of clicked as you were reading Royce's comment.
Okay.
So Chris Whitpan says, I love the variety of play and multiple win conditions. Lots of interaction, but always a way to work around it. I look forward to many plays. So far, a favorite of 2017.
So kind of taking another point of view on this, Sandwich Harmon says, on the ducal scale, Yokohama it's built beautifully with lots of ways to succeed, with a moment or two to feel clever, but in the end, it fails to engage or feel different play to play. Our first play was great, and after that, it was meh.
And what's interesting is I had the opposite experience. My first play was, I don't know about this, and afterwards it was, yeah, pretty great. Scott Neelitz says, it was a great gaming experience without overstaying its welcome. The puzzle of creating paths, planning ahead a couple turns, and the intricacies of the different ways to get points was very satisfying. I'm typically not a fan of point salad games, but this one definitely hit the spot. I can't wait to get the deluxe version out more often. And I will say, too, in terms of the overstaying its welcome, part of the reason that 3-player game I first played overstayed its welcome was orders was how that thing was supposed to trigger. The trick was at the beginning of the game, you get 2 orders, you're supposed to discard 1.
Right.
We didn't discard it to the box, we discarded it back to the deck that you use for the game. And sure enough, there were, I think, 3 or 4 rounds where we had 2 orders left in the stack, where game end would have already been triggered. And I was like, when is this going to end? And so it was as a result of Grumpy Man Matthew not setting up the game properly. Take that, Matthew. Oh, by the way, happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday,
Happy
Matthew.
birthday, Matthew. No, I'm just kidding. Matthew did a great job teaching it, mostly.
Wow. So let's go to our final thoughts. We here use a 6-point rating scale. A 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun. A 6 is an all-time favorite. That's a contender for the top 10. I'm going to go first. I don't think there's any surprise. Well, I don't know. It might be a surprise. It's a 5.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a very solid 5. Maybe a high 5. 5 is a great game.
High 5?
No, not high 5.
Aw.
Switcheroo.
You left me hanging.
Let me get my final thought, Alex. Come on. 5. Great game. Will rarely turn down a play of it. I might have flirted with a 6 at some point, but ultimately, I think I knew this was going to be at a 5. This is something that I am eager to play more games of this. I'm happy to teach it. It may look overwhelming, but it's not that rough of a teach. Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, but I think that someone with some experience with, these resource management Euro games is going to pick this up pretty easily. So yeah, very solid, maybe a high-ish 5.
Highish 5?
Nope.
Okay.
Great game. Will rarely turn on a play of it.
So, as I mentioned earlier, my first play of this, I was hovering somewhere in the 3. I wasn't super stoked necessarily to play it a second time back to back, but I knew we had to kind of get enough plays in so we could properly review this thing. And I was surprised to find myself energized by that second play, not dragged down and feeling iffy about it. And the game has improved with play. It's one of those that has grown on me the more I've played it. It worked well as a dueling game at 2 players. It worked really well as a 3-player game. And to give you a sense of where I'm at this, I was on the Slack channel actually planning a play of this after we get done recording this podcast. Another play, post-review, which is unusual for the show, I might add. Normally we'll get in enough plays of a game to review it, and unless it's a true favorite or something we're really liking, it's not something we're likely to get back to the table again for a while, a lot of times. Unfortunately, in some cases. This is one that I'm already happy to play some more of. And I think that's a good sign in terms of staying power, in terms of how engaging it is and how it works. That's not to say it's not without its flaws. I went over a lot of them, as Sean would call them, quibbles.
You used the word quibbles first.
Yes. Yeah. Well, fair enough. Dang it. I'm getting out-lawyered again. So that gives you a sense of how I've enjoyed this one. And it wasn't love at first sight with this game by any means. But at the end, I'm perfectly comfortable settling in at a 5. A great game will rarely turn on a play of it. And I think that's where I'm at. We'll rarely turn on a play of it if it's already set up. I don't know if I want to spend so much time setting the thing up. But I do enjoy it. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. I really appreciate the variability. And it's the kind of tactical planning that I find I really enjoy in games. It checks a lot of boxes for sure. So it's a 5. I don't know if it could rise to a 6, but it's one I've certainly enjoyed playing so far. So yeah, I'll settle right where you're at, Sean. It's a 5. A great game. We'll really turn on a play of it.
Very cool. Well, that's going to do it for the Duke's review of Yokohama, a pair of 5s. Hard 10. Woo!
It's time for America's favorite new game show, Spoils of War! This week, our contestant Sean Ramirez is trying to figure out how many ones are out there. Sean.
Hi there, Alex. I'm really excited to be here. I love this show, and I'm ready to guess.
And how many are you going to guess?
Four ones. There's 4 ones.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Sean. You lose.
Oh, so there's not 4?
No.
Oh, you should tell the home audience how many there are.
3. There were 3. So Spoils of War is an awesome take from Arcane Wonders on Liar's Dice, but with a little Viking and gambling twist to it.
So Spoils of War has been designed by Brian Pope and Jason Medina, and we're expecting a June 2017 release right around the corner.
We got this one in at BGGCon, and it was a ton of fun.
It absolutely was. Big fan of Liar's Dice, and the twist and the depth that this adds to that, I think is definitely something worth checking out.
Check out Arcane Wonders' new title, Spoils of War, coming out sometime in June. And check out all of Arcane Wonders' awesome titles at arcanewonders.com. All right, this week we are discussing importing games, something I have no experience doing whatsoever. Well, kind of.
Well, and we should point out real quick, there's no Duke's Double Take this week because this time last year, we were doing an update of our previous year's top 10, which we've done the last couple years. Basically, we do one at the end of a calendar year, and then we do it again in April as we've had more time to play. I have so many ways I could update my top 10 of 2016, but you weren't around playing games for the last 4 months.
Not very many games.
So
yeah, and so I don't know if my list would have moved maybe at all.
Made that difficult. But anyway.
Or significant. So, yeah. Sean might do a video at some point with his refreshed top 10.
I might. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you should do that.
Okay, I'll do that. So, yeah, we're talking about importing games. And one of the reasons is because Yokohama was a game that, Tasty Minstrel, I think they went to like a Japan con, a Japan game fair, and had played it there and were like, oh, we got to bring this back. And so that's something that publishers will do, right? They'll go over overseas and they'll say, oh, this is something we want to bring back and publish, make it available to a wider audience in the West. And sometimes that happens on an individual scale. You'll play a game and be like, oh, that's fantastic. Where can I get that? Oh, you can't unless you want to order it specially from Europe or whatever. I have done this several times. Sometimes you can do this through just regular US Amazon because they'll have fulfillers that are bringing it in. There are websites like Board Game Bliss that kind of help with that importing as well. And someone mentions that. I've done that. I can't remember what game. Oh, it was Doxu from White Goblin Games, which was, I think, a recommendation of Richie Turner. And he's like, yeah, you should definitely check this out. Board Game Bliss is bringing it over. So that's something that's really cool. Someone's going to mention from the guild, Amazon.de, German Amazon. I've had one experience and it hasn't been good.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
What happened, Sean?
So I ordered, what's that one roll and write that we played with Suzanne at BGG-Con? Quinto.
I was going to, I had a moment. I had something prepped.
I'm cutting you off.
You're not going
to say,
Rolling America.
Dang it.
You almost did it in unison.
I know. I didn't want to do it in unison, so I stopped. Anyway, Quinto. It's Quinto, a fantastic roll and write game. It was the Camel Up card game, and there was something else I can't remember. Anyway, I paid for it. It shipped. It took its sweet time getting here, and then UPS lost it. And
womp, womp.
I've been fighting with UPS for like 2 months to try and hunt it down.
Man, if only you could find a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, anyway, that's a problem is it takes time. I don't have time to mess around with that. I'm a little gun shy to go back to Amazon.de, even though it's not really their fault. But yeah. So
Wouldn't you be more gun shy to go back to UPS?
No, because they handle all of other Amazon stuff, and I rely too much on that. Them and FedEx and yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, well, but it's not so much UPS. It's the handshake. It's the exchange between the two.
All right.
I don't know. So yeah, I think for me, if there is a game that I hear is fantastic, I'm not confident on when it's going to get a US release. And if it's a right price, I mean, I'll spend $30 for a $20 game. Am I going to spend $150 for an $80 game? Probably not. That's probably outside my comfort zone.
I was on my trip looking for Japanese games to grab and bring over, and I had a significantly hard time doing so. Other than that, I've never really sought out games to import. I oftentimes just have to wait and hope and I hope this gets here soon. I hope someone brings this one over. And that's a shame because I think I probably miss out on some really interesting gaming experiences as a result of that. Oftentimes it's Duke Suzanne, who has to share a lot of the cool ones with us at conventions. So I'm glad she brings them over. But yeah, I barely buy regular games over here, Sean. So it's probably not a surprise to folks that I don't import a ton of stuff.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So a lot of comments in the guild.
Yeah. By the way, straight up props to the guild in general this week, because after last week where we had the naming contest shut down after one thing, this was huge response on all fronts. So thanks to folks for contributing. We'll try and read all of them.
So Scott Sexton says, in most cases, an adherent to Vassal's law when it comes to importing games. And basically that's, if it's good, it'll get reprinted in the US sooner or later.
I think that's Vassal's law.
Oh, boy. Also referencing a terrible joke
last
he made.
year.
Yeah. The big exception to this are the small-time niche games that he'll back on Kickstarter from time to time that won't be able to easily get hands-on stateside.
Royce Calverley says, I generally don't worry about imports unless I have a good reason to search them out. I've searched out a few that never came to North America and likely never will, such as Helvetia and Sheffy. Alternatively, there are a few that I chased down on import because I disliked something about the North American version.
Chris Whitpin says, I have imported several games. Amazon DE, makes that a bit easier, so you say, along with some BGG purchases I have had shipped in the past. In most cases, I'm very glad I did. Few exceptions exist to this, but they are there. Of course, most of the time, as was the case with Orleans, for example, the games can be in your hands up to a year earlier. The side benefit of this is that I can get my games played many times before it hits the mainstream. And I think that's definitely true too. Yeah, it's cool. You can be one of the cool kids on the block if you can get something ahead of time. Absolutely.
I'm not a cool kid.
You are certainly not, Alex. Was that too forceful?
Yeah, you weren't supposed to agree that hard.
No, come on, guy. What else does the guild have to say?
James Holtzhauer says, I've only gone out of my way to get a couple of import games. The first was the really nasty horse racing game, which sounds really interesting to me.
Okay.
That I played at a local convention and then got it from an eBay dealer. I doubt that the game will make it to the USA due to theme, turf racing, and age. The other import game was a Kickstarter for Cavern Tavern, mainly due to theme. Game is technically an import due to the designers being from Macedonia, but it was still a Kickstarter game. That purchase was entirely based on theme. James, I'm right there with you in terms of theme-based purchases. So, yeah. My arch nemesis, Steve O'Rourke, the name father, says, on occasion I've been known to seek out games that aren't really available in the States. I've only done it when my interest level was really high and the costs were within 1.5 times regular domestic shipping. So he brings up a good point. What is the limit? How much more will you pay to get a game earlier, Sean?
Well, not necessarily just earlier, but...
Or at all.
At all. And I think I might have addressed that. I mean, I feel like I'd pay an extra 50%, but it definitely goes down as the game gets more expensive. I mean, like I said, if I'm paying $30 for a $20 game, I'm fine with that. That's fine. But too much more than that, not really. But again, it's nice where there are some channels like Board Game Bliss, for example, not a sponsor of the show, but we keep mentioning them. But they make it, at least here in North America, they make it easier because they are bringing some of those games in. Speaking again of Board Game Bliss, Richie Turner says, I import games frequently. Usually it's because it's not available in the States and most likely never will be. I'll also import games if there's a better looking version of the game available outside the States. And so he brings up Castles of Mad King Ludwig, which has a fantastic looking Polish edition, which, yeah. Anyway, and then last reason, sometimes it's actually cheaper. So that's a wrinkle, right? It's actually cheaper to import the game rather than buy the English version. At the time I bought Rococo and Russian Railroads, it was cheaper to buy the German versions even after the shipping gets figured in. And he says that BoardGameBliss.com is far and away his favorite place to get imports.
Scott Nealett says, as for importing, I think it's worthwhile in a few circumstances. While games may be brought over by publishers, sometimes there can be a lag time. Sometimes the extra premium is worth the enjoyment you get for the time you have it, while everybody else is just sitting and waiting.
So then Samish Harmon brings up an interesting point. He says, I think the internet has erased traditional market boundaries, and with the rest of the world creating such amazing games, I want to feast on that meal. So, for example, a lot of the Oink games are they from Japan?
Yeah, I believe so.
I think so. BGG brings them in. You're kind of paying a bit to pay for them. I mean, they're probably like a $15 game, but you're paying like $30 plus shipping usually. But there's a lot of fantastic Oink games that you can only get through the BGG store here in the US.
And they look wonderful.
Yeah.
Consistently, they look wonderful.
So AJ says, I generally don't import games. Of the 200 plus games I own, I've only imported Port Royal. He bought it on US Amazon through a European merchant, which is exactly, Alex, what I did. Did import that one. Because it looked really fun, was inexpensive, and I couldn't find any information on a US release. Mysterium is a good example of upgraded components in its US version, but reasonable people will disagree on the artwork.
So Mysterium's an interesting point because that is the one game I own 2 copies of. Sort of. I actually own 2 copies of Mataina as well. But 2 different versions, the overseas version, I think the Polish version, and the US version. I own both of those. And my Polish version, unfortunately, is missing some of the cards involved in it. Thanks, Dice Tower Con sale. I think it was Jason who sold that one to me.
It was Tom's copy, I think.
Right.
But Jason was working the booth at the
Jason.
virtual flea.
Actual not virtual. No, it was an in-person flea market.
Yeah.
He's like, no, don't worry. They'll get you replacement cards. There's no problem. No, I never got the replacement cards. Kind of bummed out. Also, the U.S. components ended up being significantly better. There's some difference on some of the artwork, but the important artwork, the ghost cards, which are hugely important as far as all that goes, not to diminish the location cards or some of the other cool artwork in there. I think the U.S. artwork is fine enough, and the components themselves are such a huge upgrade with that game that it plays a lot better. So, yeah, I agree. There can be differences between a U.S. version and an overseas version, and sometimes the one overseas is better. In the case of Mysterium, though, the U.S. one was significantly beefed up when it was brought here.
So finally, Jesse Metcalf says, for the most part, I wait for games to make it to the U.S. market. I like supporting my friendly local game store as much as possible, and I dislike dealing with foreign shipping issues, so costs, customs, etc. I'm feeling you there, Jesse. The few times I've dealt with foreign shipping were primarily for miniature wargame minis and such. There are some very well-done miniatures and bits made by European producers that just aren't in good supply here in the U.S. So, yeah, I mean, I think a nice range there on the guild. Some not crazy about it, and some do it on occasion. And there's some like Suzanne that do it all the time.
Yay! Thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah.
You're the greatest.
But you know what? It's interesting because there are people like Suzanne who you can you follow what she's looking at on Twitter or whatever, and you're like, ooh, that's pretty good. Especially if you have tastes aligned with someone that is importing. It kind of gives you a heads up, hey, here's something you should definitely look out for. I think one of the more recent foreign acquisitions was the Skull King. Because like I said, that was...
The Skull King!
That was Schmidt Spiel version, which there's a different one. So I went on Amazon, and there was one that was, prime shipping and everything. I'm like, ooh. And then I'm like, wait, no, someone told me to get the Schmidt version. Found the Schmidt version. It was going to take like an extra 3 weeks to get here. So it costs a little bit more in shipping. But I'm like, nope, I'll do the Schmidt Spiel version. I've also got Xnimt, which is something that John from John Gets Games, I think he talked about it. I also think Patrick Hillier talked about it on the show before. That is kind of, the next level of 6-Nimt. And I'm like, yeah, I love 6-Nimt. I totally want to play this. I brought it in, and it's only in German. So I'll have to download the rules somewhere.
Womp womp.
Yeah, all right. So, yeah, I think definitely some hidden jewels out there that a lot of us who only have access to, the North American market definitely should look into. But, of course, there's still plenty of games over here that you could completely ignore that and be totally healthy and happy and whatever.
Would you be living a complete life, Sean?
Yes, you would.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You absolutely would.
Okay, fair enough. Before we get to runner-up titles...
Oh, boy.
An update to a segment brought to you... he's giving me the wrap-up again. It's actually a quicker version of this one, Sean. So I had last week, if you go back to last week's show, the Ducal I, talked about possibly doing some sort of board game advice column of some form or fashion. And I read a couple of Yahoo Answers questions, a tribute to my brother and me. done by the McElroy brothers. Fantastic podcast. You should check it out because it's absolutely hilarious. Completely hilarious. Since mentioning that last week, there are 2 other mysterious podcasters who have reached out to me, and we may be forming an unholy alliance.
A triumvirate, if you will?
Perhaps. Stay tuned. There may be updates in the near future. We'll see. We're working out some kinks in terms of getting the blessing of folks and going forward with it. We actually have reached out directly to the McElroy brothers for to see if they're cool with this. Are we good? Are we good? We'll find out. Anyway, stay tuned. That's coming at some point. Hopefully soon. Maybe.
That's called vague casting.
Vague casting.
You know, there's vague booking, on Facebook.
Never heard it. No.
Is it called something else?
It might.
Vague
it might be
booking.
called exactly what you're talking about. I've just never heard of it.
Oh, life. Am I right? And anyway.
Yeah, what are you referring to?
I'm going to give myself the wrap it up signal.
Excellent.
All right, let's go to the naming runners up. First, we had Daniel Newman with That's What Hayashi Said, which... I really like this one, Daniel.
It was good.
Yeah, I really liked it.
It was a good shot there. And I think that was the clear second place this week.
Yeah.
There were a lot of great names. We had to trim a few off of the list, which doesn't always happen. This was, I think, the clear runner-up.
Yeah.
So, well done. Eugene came with Big in Japan, referencing an Alphaville song. So a song from a German band, referencing Big in Japan. It all worked together. Good job, Eugene.
Todd Kauk?
Nope. Say it right.
Todd Kauk?
Yeah, that was much better.
I think that busted out my eardrum a little bit there.
Okay, well.
Waiting at the dock of the bay.
Yeah. Chad Pethybridge had Tariffs, Merchants, and Goods, referencing TMG, Tasty Minstrel Games, who put out Yokohama. Thought that was a cool way of incorporating things and referencing imports. So good job, Chad.
And then finally, Neil Hoffman was kind of tying into the Yokohama as a tire company, which has nothing to do with the game Yokohama.
And in fact references this in his title.
Yes. Tireless exporter. A tireless exporter, which it's very clever.
So that's our top 6, but we also wanted to mention Jeff Rademacher had one that made you think. It wasn't ever going to be the title of the show, I don't think, because it was just too many layers, I think. The reason the Beatles broke up. Think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Think about it out there. Took me a second to get it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yep.
Got it.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Dukes of Dice. Sean, is there some formal way you'd like to close out this program, this cast of pod?
The same way we do every week, Alex.
Try and take over the world.
I would am I the brain and you're Pinky? Is that how this is?
I think that's the closest representation we could get to. I don't know if I agree with that, but yeah. I think it's the closest. If you had to assign 1-to-1, yeah, sure. I think that's how it would go.
Okay, which of the Animaniacs? Never mind.
What?
Let's end episode 144. Call me Meiji. Do. Oh,
that's going to be stuck in my head now. Oh, no.
Do.
Come on, Carly Ray, Sean.
Thanks, Matthew S. So until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
Hail Hydra.
Thank you so much for listening to The Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on May 18th, 2017. Our theme music is provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to dukesofdice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games and Arcane Wonders. Check out all their awesome titles at playtmg.com and arcanewonders.com. We'll see you back here next week. Until then, game on!